On this week's Eastern Conference edition of Locked On NHL, we'll take a look around the Atlantic and Metropolitan divisions, discuss coaches who are on the hot seat, and will Alex Ovechkin break Wayne Gretzky's all-time NHL goals record this season? On today's Locked On NHL.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On NHL, your team every day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find local experts on the biggest stories 5 days a week. I'm Ross Levitan. You can find me over at Locked On Ottawa Senators. That's Mike DiStefano from Locked On Toronto Maple Leafs. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and if your bet wins, you will get started with $150 in bonus bets. You can get started by visiting FanDuel.com. Today is Wednesday, November 6th, and Mikey, my goodness, there is no separation in the Eastern Conference.
Oh, I know. From top to bottom, it feels like everyone's got a chance. I guess, like, it's especially in the Atlantic Division. I mean, between second and last, it's a 6-point spread, and there's even like games in hand too for that to be even shrunk even further. It's really is parity is the name of the game, and you could kind of look at it all around the NHL. Like, every team has at least 4 wins so far this year, and last year it didn't seem like that was the case. I think parity is really, really good for the game, and it seems like that's kind of what we got cooking right now. Like, you've got the Montreal Canadiens who won 4 games. You've got teams like Columbus with 5 wins. The Flyers have 4 wins. Like, it really does seem like we've got I don't know. It just seems like this year more than ever, the top and bottom, there's not much separation.
There really isn't, and teams are winning against each other now. We're seeing a lot more Atlantic Division games. Last night, we had one with Toronto and Boston, Ottawa and Buffalo as well. Like, I know, obviously, I'm following Ottawa closest, but it feels like almost half their games have been against the Western Conference, and I don't know if that's just a scheduling anomaly, but coming up, there's a ton of Atlantic action. Ottawa, Boston on Saturday. We got the first Battle of Ontario next Tuesday. Like, yeah, it feels like it's finally starting to come to a head where we'll get those 4-point games where we'll see some separation in the standings depending on who can come out on top in those head-to-head games.
Yeah, and the Leafs are hitting that same stretch. Like, they had Boston last night, got a big dub. First time in 2 calendar years that the Maple Leafs have beaten the Bruins in the regular season.
Ooh.
Like, to the day, literally, November 5th, 2022 is the last time that the Leafs had a regular season win. Great win, 4-0 dub without Austin Matthews, too. Complete team effort. But, yeah, the Leafs are kind of in a similar stretch right now themselves. So they had Boston last night. They've got Detroit on Friday, Montreal on Saturday, and then the Battle of Ontario is coming up. So this is, going to start to separate at some point here. But it is interesting. We got teams just kind of grabbing points off each other. Like last night, right? Buffalo grabbing points off of Ottawa to kind of stay in tow there with those teams who are battling for, I guess, not only, I suppose the divisional games are still up. The divisional spots are still up for grabs. Nothing set in stone yet at all. But we know that those wild card spots are definitely going to be up for grabs here. And those 2 teams are going to be jockeying for positioning. So for Buffalo to pick up a big 2 points last night against your Senators definitely goes a long way. And that's one thing, too, that, like, how concerned are people in Ottawa getting about this road record? Were they 1-5 on the road?
Yeah, 5-1 at home. Like, it's hilarious. They're a 500 team, but they cannot win on the road. Now, that said, 3 of those losses are in 3 of the toughest buildings to play in: Vegas, Colorado, and Madison Square Garden against the Rangers. And they held the Rangers to a 2-1 game where they honestly deserve better. That Igor Shesterkin, pay that man his money. He's unbelievable. But yeah, it's been an issue for years to come. And you see that with inexperienced teams often, where you get the matchups at home, you get the crowd on your side, and it's just momentum. Ottawa hasn't been able to handle momentum well. They tie the game against Colorado and then give up 2 goals in quick succession. Last night, it was 2 goals in 17 seconds at the start of the 3rd period. Honestly, I was feeling good about Ottawa's chances after 2 periods. Down 2-1. They had carried more of the play at 5-on-5, but last night, Buffalo got 2 power play goals. They had 3 all season going into last night's game. So Ottawa's power play, which is still 4th in the NHL, is on an 0 for 13 streak right now. And they've got to fix that if they want any hope of getting that record up, especially on the road where you need your special teams and your goaltending on the road. And they haven't really had either clicking at the same time outside of their one win, which was a shutout against Utah. So I think in Ottawa, it's all about getting consistency. And I keep pointing at the end of the season where Ottawa has maybe the most favorable final 15 games of the year, where they play Columbus 3 times. They only have 1 road game in their final 13 games of the season. They're going to be at home. And I keep saying it's either going to be the best atmosphere or there's going to be nobody there if they're already out of the race. There's no in between. Where they need to do is at least figure out the road record by December, because everyone knows the World Juniors this year is in Ottawa. They've got a 10 game road trip, I believe. Now it is split up with the Christmas break where they all go home and then come back, but they need to figure it out by Christmas, how to win on the road. And even this weekend, I mentioned the 2 games coming up. They do play the Islanders tomorrow at home, but then at Boston, at Toronto. Like, you can't lose both those games in regulation. And that's been the real Achilles heel. Last year in the Western Conference on the road, Ottawa was 1-14-1. 1-14-1. Like,
not gonna make the playoffs like that.
That's the biggest issue. Now, Spin Zone is their elite at home, 5-1, and they have 2 8-goal games at home. Like, there are good things to build off of, and not to make this Locked On sense, people can go there for more. But Shane Pinto's absence, and we've talked about the stat, they're 29-15-3 all time when Stützle, Norris, and Pinto play down the middle. They miss him. He's missed 6 games. He is skating, though, ready to return. And Travis Hamonic should not be playing top pair minutes in the NHL, let alone anchoring your best defenseman. Jake Sanderson's looked average at best since moving with Travis Hamonic. Artem Zub is nearing a return, though. They need them. David Perron's away from the team for family reasons. Of course, that comes first, but they need his experience in the lineup to stop these droughts from turning where you let in one and then all of a sudden it seems like the next goal goes in on the next shot. So yeah, it's not panic time in Ottawa, but there's certainly reasons for concern here at 6-6.
Is there a little reason to panic if you're in Boston? Things haven't looked good in Boston at all this year. I guess they had those victories, you know, they
back-to-back shutouts.
Back-to-back shutouts, but it was against Philly and against Seattle. Like, those,
well, back-to-back, they just happened to get shut out last night.
And then they get shut out in a divisional game against the Maple Leafs, a team that they have owned over the last 2 years. And they got absolutely bullied by the Leafs last night. They're 6-7-1, a .464 points percentage, -12 goal differential. They're insanely undisciplined. They've taken more penalties than any team in the NHL. The Bruins, to me, and I know, you know, it is a team that could turn it around quickly, obviously, but so far through the first month of the season, they're probably the team that I'd be most worried about.
I think that's extremely fair to say. Now, I did see a great message from our friend Don on Twitter. He goes, I've stopped predicting 3 things in life: the demise of the Bruins, the rise of the Senators, and winning games in November, where Ottawa, that's a specific thing where they just have not been able to win in November. But the fall of the Bruins is something that people have been predicting for a long, long time.
It's going to happen eventually.
But you think so? Now, we'll get to it in the next segment, talking about potential coaches on the hot seat. But I think the biggest concern for Boston is that we saw and I know they downplayed it, but Brad Marchand getting into it with Jim Montgomery, and then the decision in a win over Seattle to bench your star player for the entirety of the third period. To me, that's a coach that's saying, hey, I need to make some drastic measures here to prove a point to try to get everybody back in the mix, because the true test of a man is how you face adversity. And there hadn't been a whole lot. His first season in Boston, they set the all-time record for most points in a year. Then last year, they have a successful season, get past round 1 of the playoffs again. But, I mean, come on. You got to be able to get through these tough patches to be able to get the true measure of success. So we'll get to that a little bit more. Before we move past the first segment, though, what's the main story in Leafland right now?
Austin Matthews is injured right now, the captain of the Maple Leafs. So whenever your captain's missing with an unknown upper body injury for an unknown amount of time, he's currently day-to-day. That's the big story, obviously, that's going on in Leafland. That and the fact that the power play finally erupted last night. You talked about how Buffalo was piss poor on the man advantage. The Leafs were just as bad, 10% going into that game last night, scoring on just 4 of 40 opportunities. They went 3 for 7 against the Bruins last night. So that was a big way for them to power through and beat Boston. So those are the two big stories in Leafland. We talked about it on today's Locked On Leafs podcast. So you can go check that out for more there.
All right. On the other side, are there more coaches on the hot seat in the Eastern Conference? And we'll wrap up today's show discussing the red hot start of the Washington Capitals and Alex Ovechkin, who is now just 35 goals away from setting the NHL record for most in a all-time career. That's coming up. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. If you love daily fantasy sports, Prize Picks is the best place to get real money on sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. Here's how it works. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means that you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can also double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. So go to the place where you can get real money on sports action and join over 10 million users by signing up today. Because you listen to Locked On NHL, get this. You can download the app and use our code LOCKEDONNHL and get $50 instantly after playing your first $5 lineup. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL. That's LOCKEDON NHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Welcome back, Locked On NHL, your team every day. Mike and I are here every Wednesday breaking down the Eastern Conference, and we will get to those red-hot Washington Capitals. What a start to the season it's been in D.C., but we got to talk coaches because we've seen a couple seats get a little bit hotter. We already mentioned Jim Montgomery in Boston. Is his seat the hottest to you in the early going of the regular season?
It's weird to say that it is, considering like how much success he's had as a coach and how much success that organization has had and the stability that's been there for years. But yeah, I think he is the hottest seat right now. It's a team that has high expectations and they know that they're in a win now window, right? So like if they're not pushing the right buttons, the team's not getting any younger. So they've got to get someone in there that is going to push the right buttons, put this team on the right trajectory, and so far he has not been able to do that, right? Brad Marchand seems to have lost a step. You know, the little spat that they had hasn't really sparked him. You know, Pasternak did not come out and have the most inspiring game against the Maple Leafs yesterday after being benched. So things aren't looking great in Boston. And I don't remember if you recall the conversations, but if the Leafs were to have beaten them in Game 7 and eliminate the Bruins, there was talk of maybe, you know, that could cost him his job last year, a season after a record-breaking year, which was crazy to think about. But that was the conversation last year, you know, heading into that Game 7 against Toronto. Now they went on to round 2, and he kept his job. But now starting off the season so poorly to start the year, I do think that he's got a pretty hot seat. And the undiscipline of the team kind of also speaks to, you know, the fact that, you know, that I don't know if that reflects poorly on the coach, but it definitely doesn't look good, I would say. So, you know, there's a couple of factors, couple of reasons why I think that Montgomery is definitely hearing footsteps and possibly of the GM there, because there are a couple of bad losses away from him maybe getting his walking papers.
For me, I'm looking at desperate teams that really need to play well. And there's one in particular that's being carried by their true superstar to at least a half respectable start. And that's another one of the longest serving coaches. You know where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I do.
The
I assume
Pittsburgh
it's
Penguins. Mike
yeah.
Sullivan. Could he be a guy on the hot seat for you?
You know what? Like yes. The answer is yes. I think you'd be silly to say that he's not on the hot seat if things continue to go south the way that they have for the Pittsburgh Penguins. I think they're second last in the division right now. Like they just can't get a save. Like that's their biggest issue. They cannot stop pucks. They've given up 54 goals in 14 games. I believe that leads the entire National Hockey League to this point, tied with the Colorado Avalanche. That is. It's absolutely unbelievable how poor this team has been. And it's just not what you come to expect from a Mike Sullivan-led Pittsburgh Penguins team. Now, is the group what they used to be? No, they're not. But yeah, I'm with you. I think that there's definitely has to be a conversation. It doesn't feel like Pittsburgh has an appetite to make a change behind the bench. Dubas came out over the summer, gave him a vote of confidence, but if things don't change, like this isn't a group that can afford to go south. Like same exact thing with the Boston Bruins. They gotta push to a playoff spot this year because it's only getting harder year in and year out. If he can't get it done and if he's lost the room and he doesn't, if the message has gone stale because he's been there so long, they might need to get a new voice in there.
Well, he wouldn't be the first coach fired because he can't get a save, right? Like it just comes with the territory. It's show me a good goalie, I'll show you a good coach, and vice versa too. So I think that certainly in Pittsburgh, the seat has to be a little bit on the hot side right now. But who would have thought that a team where the right side of their defense is Erik Karlsson and Chris Letang in their age that they are now, that they would be struggling defensively? I mean, who could have seen that coming?
Well, I know, right? Imagine if it was 10 years ago, boy, what a group that would have been. Imagine that team 10 years ago. They assembled that group that's there now 10 years ago. They'd be Stanley Cup favorites.
Dynasty.
Absolutely. The problem is they're all closing in on 40 years old and are shells of themselves. That's the issue in Pittsburgh.
Well, the thing too, and you look at Pittsburgh, like they don't have really anywhere to go from here, right? Like they're capped out. They've got a goalie making $5 million who can't make a save in Tristan Jarry,
who they sent back home from a road trip and said, go work on yourself. Okay, wow. Go work on yourself. You've lost it a bit. Let's get you going with John Elkin, the goalie coach, and hopefully we can get your game back. That's what they think of this man right now.
Well, and then you look at it from an even further zoomed out perspective, and look, Mike Sullivan's a fantastic coach, and he will get a job, I think, days after being let go, if that is the case. But that said, I mean, you always look at general managers who didn't hire their own guy, right? That gets you on the hot seat a little bit quicker, where they want their own guy in place, and we'll see what happens with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Sticking in the Metropolitan Division, the Philadelphia Flyers had a pretty decent start to the season in their first couple of games, at least, but they've got 4 wins here in 13 games. I don't think that that's off the rails from what their expectations were realistically going into the season, where they're a young team in a rebuild. They've made that clear. What's your thoughts with John Tortorella? Always a hot button topic. Like, is he a guy who we could be looking at as well?
Possibly. I did see Shane O'Brien yesterday tweet out that he thinks that, that people should be adding Torts to the coach's hot seat list. And, and I only say that because it feels like Torts, for the last 4 teams that he's coached, seems like there's been a quick expiration date on him, whether it was Vancouver or whether it was who was he with before Vancouver? I'm trying to
Tampa.
No, before all of that. It eventually ran stale with New York and Vancouver.
Oh, of course. Yes.
I thought he was somewhere else in between. Maybe not.
Yeah. No. He went for Columbus. Columbus.
That's it. Then he was with Columbus. It just seems like, you get a couple of years out of him and then the message goes a little flat and stale and the team kind of flames out. And I don't know. Maybe that's where we're at right now when it comes to the Philadelphia Flyers. Again, no one had high expectations on this team, but Torts, I don't know if Tortorella is like the type of coach to lead a young group into a rebuild. Like, I just don't know if the fit's there. I didn't think that when he first got hired. It didn't make sense to me. It still doesn't make sense to me now today. So I don't know. I could see possibly something happening, or maybe they just chalk it up and say, whatever, it's a lost year anyway. But it's not going to be a fun season in Philadelphia.
Let's hear from you in the comments. Let us know which head coach in the Eastern Conference do you think is sitting on the hottest seat here in early November. Who had Alex Ovechkin with the start he's on? 7 goals, 14 points in 11 games this season. Will he get close or break Wayne Gretzky's all-time goals record of 894 this season? That discussion next. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NHL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com today to join. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Network.
Welcome back, Locked On NHL, your team every day. I'm Ross Levitan. That's Mike DiStefano. You can find us on Locked On Senators, Locked On Maple Leafs. Make sure you're subscribed to all your favorite Locked On podcasts wherever you find podcasts, and on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and over at Locked On Washington Capitals, they have to be thrilled with the start that their team is having. 8-3-0, despite losing their last game. Still an amazing start to the season, not only for the team, but for Alex Ovechkin. 860 goals in his illustrious career. Pretty much en route, on pace to break the goals record this season. It's 34 to tie, 35 to win, and he has 71 games left in the season. Does he get it this year, Mikey?
It's going to be close, man. It's going to be so close, but I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to say he gets it because he looks super motivated this year. He's shooting a lot better this season. It's got a bit of a high shooting percentage at 19. So, maybe they don't start to drop as often as they are this year, but I think that they've built a decent team around him, and they've actually given him, some playmakers to allow him to create offense, which hasn't really been there in the last couple of seasons. Dylan Strome is really breaking out into a player. Connor McMichael is a really solid player for them right now too. So they're getting some good secondary offense to kind of give him a little bit of help to get him there. And look at his last 4 games, 5 goals his last 4 games. He's in a 4-game goal streak, and he's scored in 4 of his last, 6 of his last 8 games after starting the year with 0 for the first 3. 6 of his last 8, he's put the puck in the back of the net. So he's red hot right now. So I have no reason to say he's not going to continue. He wants this record, Ross. He wants it so bad. I think he's going to get it this year. I really do.
I do too. And I also think that when we get close, I think that's going to vault him even closer. You know what I mean? Where like they're going to be feeding him even more than they do. I think he'll average 6 or 7 shots a game. When he gets within 10 goals, I'm going to FanDuel and hammering the over shots on goal for Ovi every single night. He is going to be letting it fly. And you mentioned Dylan Strome. One of the underrated best stories so far this season is Alexei Protas, this big Belarusian winger, but he's opening up so much space on that line. The 3 of them, when they're out there at 5-on-5, they've got 10 goals for, only 3 against, and they've played 94 minutes together. Like, they've found a nice, like, yin-yang plus line where you've got the playmaker in Dylan Strome, the goal scorer in Ovechkin, and Alexei Protas doing all the dirty work down low being a big body and creating havoc. So, man, what they've found there, not only with that line, but then you look at it as well, their most consistent line so far this season has been Connor McMichael, another breakout guy, with Pierre-Luc Dubois and Tom Wilson, who's having a resurgence of his own. So all in all, the Capitals are cooking with fire right now. They're getting pretty good goaltending as well on top of that. I just see this is a team where the fact that as a team they're doing well, it bodes even better for Ovechkin to get that record.
I agree. That's kind of where I'm at also. And they've been excellent at home. They've had a very favorable schedule to start, I'll say. 7 of their first 11 games on home ice, and they're 6-1 in those games. But, still, I think that they're playing well. This is a team that's well coached. Spencer Carberry has found something with this group, and it's working. They made the additions this offseason to make them a better club, to make them more of a playoff team, to keep that window open, to give Ovechkin a little bit more help to get to that record. It's all clicking. It's all clicking right now. So, yeah, I've been very, very surprised. I thought that I was a fan of the Capitals off season. I know that there was a lot of people who were, kind of wish-wash on it, not sure how to feel. I did think it was going to make them a better team, but it's actually even exceeded my expectations how well that this group has played together.
And you look at it from a goal standpoint, and that's the record that everybody's going to be watching. But if Ovi continues this pace, he's going to be top 10 in points by the end of this season, or maybe he'll be 11th probably, because Crosby's at 10 right now and he continues to rise up that chart. But Ovechkin's, like, the fact that we've gotten the entire careers of Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby starting the same year because of the lockout. Ovi had to wait 1 extra year, and that's another untold part of it. Maybe it is more and more, but missed his rookie year, which he ended up scoring over 50 goals in. He would have had that 1 year earlier. He's got another lockout to deal with where it was a 48-game season instead. Then the COVID shortened season, lost about 25, 30 games there.
COVID shortened seasons.
Yeah. Well, yeah, one he loses 10, the other one he loses 30. Like, he doesn't miss games. And I think that might be the most impressive part about Alex Ovechkin, is the way that people joke about his diet or that he's drinking Coke on the bench, that sort of thing. Like, there's only been, and I have to be careful here because, 2 of them are the shortened seasons where he didn't miss a game in either. There's only 1 season. Not even. That's this year. He has never missed more than 10 games in a season. Never.
Yeah. Because, 12-13 was the
48-game lockout shortened season.
Year, so he played the year. Yeah, legitimately. He's the most that he's ever missed was 73.
11, because he played 45 out of 56 in the COVID year. 2020, 2021.
Oh, 2021. Yeah, okay, sure. And then he missed 9 in 22-23. He missed 9 games there. He's been a beacon of health, a beacon of consistency for so many years. And that's what's also so impressive, because he plays a hard style game. Like, it's not as though this guy sits and plays a perimeter game. Like, he's, been a power forward his entire career. So that's what's also super impressive about Alex Ovechkin. He's a horse, man, an absolute horse. And, he's 39 years old, and he's still out here putting pucks in the back of the net. And he's got a goal. He's got a goal to beat Gretzky this year. I think he hits it, man. I really do.
34 to tie, 35 to pass Wayne Gretzky. Ovechkin already with 7 goals in 11 games this season. Also, just while we're talking Sidney Crosby, Crosby's 30 points away from tying Joe Sakic for 9th on the NHL all-time points list, which might even be more impressive. We talk about Ovechkin playing all these games. Think of how many games Sidney Crosby's missed because of injury, those years with the concussion and the head injuries. Like, holy, we are very spoiled to have these two still at the top of their game in season number 20 of their careers. It's unbelievable. So credit to these guys. And now we've got a new golden age of hockey, it really feels like, with all the young talent. Connor McDavid going to be back tonight after missing a couple games with injury. You got McKinnon. What he's doing in Colorado is extraordinary. Austin Matthews hitting almost 70 goals last year. Like, the NHL is in an amazing spot, and it's just a great time to be a hockey fan right now.
Crosby, 1.25 points per game throughout his career. Ovechkin, 1.09. And keep in mind, goal scoring was down for like a decade of that career. Like for Crosby and Ovi, like it's not where it is now, where you got guys racking up like 150, 160 points, like you got Connor McDavid doing. There was years there where yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like there were years where, what was the year? Jamie Benn back in like
2016.
Yeah, 84 points. Won him in Art Ross.
Yeah, like Carlson had 82 that year as a defenseman.
Like
didn't win the Norris.
The fact that, you know, in that era, that it's still out here averaging like 1.25 points per game really goes to show just how unbelievable these players are.
Well, Crosby in particular, only McDavid has more points per game if you wind all the way back to the 2004 lockout. Like that's the only guy with more points per game than Sidney Crosby, who is still doing it. Like
that's what I mean. That's
a goal.
That's what I was getting at. That's what I was getting at. Like
5 goals his last 3 games for Sid.
Oh, I know. It's incredible. But what I was getting at is like McDavid, he's done this in an era where goal scoring is up, right? So it makes sense that his points per game is going to be higher, right? Like he's out there getting 150 points because that's possible. That wasn't possible for Crosby when he was a young buck, right? He put up 120 in his sophomore season, and that was unbelievable for him to do so. I mean, truly. So yeah, hats off to those two. Eventually they will end up here in Toronto 5 years after they retire on this very, very Hall of Fame weekend that we are embarking. Those two will be there. And if they both retire at the same time and go in together, wouldn't that be awesome?
That would be. I hope it's not soon though, because they both have gas in the tank.
Oh, Sid just signed a 2-year extension, so Sid's got at least he's got at least one more year. He's got to play at least one of those 2 years.
And stick taps to the Hockey Hall of Famers who will go in this week. We've got David Poile, the longtime executive with the Nashville Predators, previously with the Washington Capitals, where people might forget he was with Washington for 15 years before moving to Nashville, where he stayed there for another about 15 years. You've got Natalie Darwitz as well for the women's side. She led the Gophers to a national championship. She won she played for the States at 3 Olympic Games and 8 World Championships. The NHLers, we've got Pavel Datsyuk, Jeremy Roenick, Shea Weber, and we also have Chrissy Wendell-Poe, another women's decorated player. So stick taps to all the Hockey Hall of Famers. It's always a fantastic weekend in Toronto where these people get the recognition of a lifelong achievement in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Absolutely. 100%. Well-deserved. A guy like Roenick, too, who for years has been he's been like at the tippy top of the snub list for years. He always got people saying, how is Roenick not in the Hall of Fame? Guy's got 500 goals. He played the game the right way, blah, blah, blah. Well, his wait is over. He'll be going into the Hall this weekend. So, yeah, congrats to all the Hall of Famers this weekend. Should make for a fantastic event.
All right, that's it for us today on Locked On NHL, the Eastern Conference edition. Please like and subscribe everywhere you get podcasts. We'll hand it over to Power Rankings Thursday. For Mike DiStefano, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been another edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, your team every day.